Happy Sunday. Good afternoon. Happy Sunday. Welcome to our July Spine of the Month book chat. What a great book we've read for July. So excited to talk to Janika. I think I saw her in here. Welcome. Happy Sunday. Thank you for spending your Sunday afternoon with us. Hold on. Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I am doing great. I'm so excited to talk to you. Your book was absolutely amazing.
Oh, thank you so much.
I'm waiting for a few more people to join and then we're going to jump right in. How are you doing on this Sunday?
I'm doing pretty well. How about you?
Good, trying to stay hydrated and out of the heat.
Yes, yes. It rained a lot here yesterday, which helped with the heat.
Right. Same here. I'm in Washington, D.C.
Okay,
And
okay. Yeah.
you're in
Toronto.
Toronto, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we're going to jump right in, you guys. This is a fantastic book. Oh my gosh. The audio was great as well. So welcome to our July. I can't believe it's July or ending. It's not even going to be July. July Spine of the Month book chat. Janika Oza was our July Spine of the Month. Her book, A History of Burning, is her debut novel. And you're the second book in our summer reading series, which is awesome.
Amazing.
So welcome.
Thank you.
What a fantastic debut. I mean, how are you doing with all the praise and everything that this book has been getting?
It's been pretty intense. I think, with a book you spend so much time with it privately. It's
Hmm.
and this is a very personal story to me. I spent so many years just with these characters and my research, and then having it be something that people are actually interacting with and, um, bringing their own experiences and thoughts and insights to is definitely an adjustment. It's, I mean, it's amazing to be able to hear from readers, to hear from critics. Like all of that it's incredible. But yeah, very, very different from how the last few years have been.
I bet. I'll just let everyone know when you're in. If you don't have a copy of the book, you can get a copy from our bookshop. It's A History of Burning. And I want you to do like a brief intro of yourself, tell people about you, and then a little bit about the book. And then we're going to dive in. This is a spoiler-free conversation
Okay.
because I want people to read the book. And it's absolutely so dynamic. So the floor is yours.
Well, hi everyone. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you to Diverse Spines for choosing my novel. Um, I'm Janika. I am the author of A History of Burning, which is a novel about four generations of one Indo-Ugandan family. It covers about 100 years and multiple forced migrations and lands. It moves from India into East Africa, Kenya, and then Uganda, and then it moves into exile in Canada and the UK. And really, it's a novel, I think, about the stories that we tell and pass down and the ones that remain unspoken.
Oh, yes, an excellent intro. So tell us a little bit about your journey to becoming an author, and then why did you want to tell this particular story?
Mm. Well, I've always written, I've always wanted to write, and I think it's just my way of kind of processing, understanding my own experiences, my own feelings, and the world around me. But this particular story comes out of my own family history. Um, my own great grandfather moved from Gujarat, India, to East Africa in the early 1900s and worked at a railway station there, and then three generations of my family lived there until 1972, when Idi Amin, the dictator at the time, expelled all South Asians from the country. Um, so, this is a story that very much lives in my own family, but it's something that we didn't speak very much about
Mm-hmm.
growing up. Um, I knew a little bit, but not a lot.
Mm-hmm.
so when it came time to writing, I was not working on this book for a long time. I was working on something else, something totally different and unrelated that will never see the light of day. And this story just kind of kept coming into my head as I was working on the other novel project. And it just kind of kept, it was very vivid. I had these images of this family in my mind, and it just kept coming. And so finally I thought, okay, I think I should just like jot this down, put it aside, get back to the other thing. And I ended up plotting out this whole novel. And I think that really came from the fact that it was very personal. It was very connected to something that, that lives in my family, that lives in my body, that lives in the stories in my family, and at the same time, something that I was so desperately curious about.
Yeah.
Something I felt like, oh, this is actually a really big gap in my life that I don't know more about where we come from and how we came to be here. And so I really felt like there were all of these questions that I just wanted to kind of write into.
Yeah, that's so understandable. You can see that throughout the whole novel. So tell us about the research process, because there's, I mean, like you said, it spans over generations, continents. So what was the research process like for you?
Yeah, it was intense.
I bet.
I spent a while just trying to research through books, through textbooks, journal articles, the archives that I could find. But there's very little that was available. This is a history that, is quite absent from that sort of Western archive. And so I realized I would really have to actually speak to my community if I wanted to write this book. And I really wanted to write this book. So I kind of very nervously tried to break the ice with my family and tell them after like 2 years that I was working on this project, and I wanted their help if they could help me. And they were just amazing and connected me to so many people around the world, really. And so my research was really about those like Zoom and Skype calls, and WhatsApp threads that were happening like globally. A lot of conversation, a lot of storytelling that was very intergenerational. So speaking to people who were much, much older than me, in their 80s and their 70s, who had been through a lot of the things that are written about in this book. And it took many years to kind of just, gather all that information, have all those conversations, sit with all of that learning, then be able to kind of like process it and structure it into a story. But it was also, I think, a amazing process to get to kind of like open up this space in my family and in my community, and to be able to have those conversations, and just like, just hear so much, learn so much about, my own family and how we came to be here. Yeah,
I love historical fiction, and I can only imagine just being there listening to like lived experiences and then like pouring that into the story. That's such a gift. I read somewhere that you said writing is always political. Can you talk about how that impacts your storytelling?
Yeah, I think no matter what you're choosing to write about or not write about, that choice is a political one. And I think, when I was writing this book, there are definitely parts of this book that are engaging with like capital P politics. There are social movements in this book. There are characters who are activists in different parts of the world at different times, in Uganda, in Canada. And so there's kind of this desire to engage with these very real moments in history, and sort of think about how those are connected. And at the same time, I think, that is very interesting to me. That's something I wanted to include in this book. But also what is even more interesting interesting to me, I think, is when it's, when we're thinking about the way that politics is just a part of everyday life,
Yeah.
every moment. And that sort of like divide between like outside world, capital P politics, and inside the home, domestic life, like that is a fake border, right? It's all connected. And so thinking about how characters who are not engaging in like social movements or activism or protesting are still very much engaged in and affected by
Yes.
the social realities. And I think writing a novel like this, which is very much based in history, it's impossible to write it without thinking about those things, without thinking about who was in power, at what time, and how was that impacting everyday regular people. How were those power dynamics playing out in families, in romantic relationships, between parents and children, all of that. I really wanted to just kind of think about all of those dynamics from the space of a family and a home.
And so one thing that really stood out to me was the imagery in the book. I don't know about you all in the audience. If you've read the book, please drop your comments in the comment section. But the imagery throughout the story was amazing. It felt like every place you took us to, that we were present. That's how I felt. Like was that intentional?
I think for me, what brings writing alive is the detail and the specificity, and really paying attention to the different senses. And when I was writing this book initially, I was writing it sort of from an omniscient third perspective, so much more kind of like distant. And then there was a certain point where I was writing a chapter and it came out in third person close, which is the dominant perspective in this book now. And when I wrote that chapter, I kind of realized that was what I was interested in doing, because it allowed for the work to be much more embodied. It allowed for me to think about, to really drop down into the body of the character that I was writing, and think about what are they feeling at any given moment? What are the smells? What are the very particular, the way the soil looks in this particular place? All of that is so important when you're writing a story that is about these places that you have lived and loved and also had to leave. And so I really wanted to pay attention to that kind of detail.
Yeah, it comes through very, very lovely. Especially, I'm sure I listened to the audiobook, so it comes through so vividly in the audiobook. Let's talk about the importance of memory and sharing stories. And especially in times where we have the erasure of history going on, it's important to tell the truth, and book bans as well. I feel like a book like this is something that we need, to tell the stories people may have forgotten, or maybe they didn't know. So talk about the importance of memory and sharing our stories.
Yeah, I think that the importance of that, I think it is a really strong, big part of this book. And that is because it was such a big part of my writing process. Like I mentioned, these were stories of Uganda and my family's life in Uganda, and also, the experiences of leaving and living in exile. Those were memories that were not really shared with me growing up. And so it did feel like a place in my life that I had so much curiosity about, so many questions about. And as I kind of got further into writing this book and learning those histories, those stories, it just became so clear to me that, this is, it's an erasure. It's not an accident that this is not a part of the documented, archive that's out there. And so writing this book became kind of an act of collective remembering, and kind of writing against that Western understanding of archive that is very much, about the individual. I wanted to think about the whole and the collective, and how does a group of people move through an experience like this. And so yeah, I was really thinking about like, how does memory live, not just in an individual, although that is, you know, a part of the book, but also how does it live within a family?
Mm-hmm.
How does it live within a community? How do those memories get passed down or not? And what happens when they don't? You know, what is the loss, or what can be gained when we start to kind of open up and make that space to talk about these things. I think there are so many reasons why these memories were not shared, right?
Yes.
It's because of trauma. It's because of the pain of it. And so for a while, I really felt like, oh, it's like not even my place to, like, you know, try to get people to talk about this.
Mm-hmm.
But I think when I started doing it, I what I encountered a lot of was actually people really wanted to talk about it, and just felt like there was so much that was buried, and there's so much difficulty in like starting, you know, in starting to
Right.
do something that you just haven't done. Um, and and sort of this idea I kept encountering with people was like, oh, actually, if we don't talk about this, nobody will ever know, right? It's like it's going to die with
Yeah.
us. And so there was almost this like urge to actually like start telling more and more, which I think is really beautiful and just really powerful and important when people get to do that, you know, in their own words.
It's very powerful and it's so needed. And I'm so thankful that, you know, you were able to do this and share this story. I mean, you explore so much in this book, and we're going to get to the characters. I definitely don't want to give too much away, but you explore so much in this book. I mean, you really center land and belonging, you know. And I read another article where you talk about, you know, the concept of people asking, you know, where are you from?
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like this book, it's like a big like answer to that question in so many ways. So can you talk a little bit about exploring, you know, survival, shifting lands and homes?
Yeah. Yeah, that was something that was so important to me writing this book, and so central, because I think it's always been kind of a question in my own life. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I am the only person in my family who was born in Canada and, you know, grew up here. Um, Everyone else in my family has left where they were born. Um, and, you know, I come from refugees and immigrants, and we're also settlers here in so-called Canada. And so there's kind of uh, always been this question for me of like, what does it mean to be all of those things
Yes.
at once? And what does it mean that my family has sought refuge in lands that are also, um, you know, causing harm to other communities?
Mm-hmm.
And so I really wanted to grapple with those questions, or they really came out as I was working on this book. And I think for me, what was interesting was to kind of allow that to exist, not just in the sections of the book that are in Canada, but also see the ways that has always been a question, that, you know, for communities who have migrated and moved multiple times, like my own community, like the community in this book.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, that's always been a question of what does it mean to belong, if you are forced to move,
Yes.
forced to adapt to a new land, or if you choose to move and you're moving because of ambition or family, or, you know, people move for so many reasons,
Mm-hmm.
people migrate for so many reasons, and still having to kind of constantly redefine home, um, and find home, and then what about when that is taken from you, right? If home exists, you know, if you've built this home through this community, and then that community is shattered and ruptured, and, you know, forced to spread across the world, then what does home
Right.
mean? So these are all questions that I was, you know, really, yeah, really grappling with, um, and I don't think the book comes to an answer or a clear answer. And um, I think it wouldn't make sense for the book to come to a clear answer of what home is, because um, the book is really about the ways that home is, you know, constantly in flux.
Mm-hmm.
How these characters are constantly kind of coming apart, coming back together, and having to sort of refine that for themselves.
Yeah. Speaking of character, typically when there's a book that has a lot of characters, I lose my way with the characters. But your execution was so seamless. Like I literally could not believe first of all that it's a debut, and then the amount of characters that were in the book and how effortlessly you wrote them to have their own distinct voice. And so I want you to talk about, of course, our main character, and then pick two other characters, to just kind of describe for the audience. You could pick 5 words to describe them, just to give an insight on the characters. Because there's a 10, right? It's 10 characters.
Yeah.
Yeah. How did you? And then how did you keep up with all of them?
Yeah. I'm glad it seemed effortless. It definitely didn't feel that way. I think moving through the generations, and when I decided that this book would be chronological as opposed to earlier drafts where I was just kind of like writing whatever was interesting to me, when I sort of streamlined it in that way, it became a lot easier to just kind of like have, the earliest generation and then the next generation. And then there was sort of a clarity and organization that happened through the timeline. I guess I can start by talking about Pirbai, who is the first character, the character that the book opens with. He's a 13-year-old boy in Gujarat, India, who is tricked into indentured servitude and taken to labor on the railroad in East Africa, and is a character who is really kind of caught between wanting to take care of his family and also trying to understand how to survive, yeah. And to understand, how to do both. And so he has his ways of understanding that, ways of surviving that he sort of passes on to his children, and that trickles down through the generations. Another character who is really special to me is Rajni, who is one of the matriarchs of this family, who comes from India to Uganda through marriage. And she's a character who is sometimes prickly, and also funny, and just very fiercely protective and loving of her family, and is a character who is inspired by my own grandmother and her journeys from India to East Africa. And yeah, I guess lastly, without any spoilers, can talk about one of the characters in the later generation, Hari, who is born in Uganda and then through 1972 exile comes to Canada, and sort of grows up as this mixed culture kid in a way, and is really kind of grappling in very real ways with those questions of belonging and what it means that he comes from this history and also knows so little about it.
Mm-hmm. Their lives are set within political and economic movements. Mm-hmm. I think that's something that I found very interesting, how the story moves, not based on, but kind of like in line with what was going on politically mm-hmm. and economically mm-hmm. in those places. Yeah. So let's talk about, there's so many themes in this book, and the impacts of colonialism, erasure, indentured servitude, resistance, the power of family. Can you talk a little bit about that? And displacement? Mm-hmm. I mean, they're all melded together. So can you talk a little bit about that and how that comes through? I mean, it's just very, very powerful in the novel, especially the colonialism aspect of it, and reminding people of the history, mm-hmm. not just here in our land, like in America, but just all over the world.
Yeah, thank you. I think, like I said before, I think it felt impossible for me to engage with this story and this history without thinking about and writing about colonialism, without writing about the impacts of the British on all of these different places. And, I was really thinking about the reason why this community was settled in Uganda was because of colonialism, right? Because of the conditions, the horrendous conditions in India for regular people, farmers, during the time of the British Raj, and of course there were people who were forced, like Pirbai, the main character, the first character, who were forced to migrate to other places to labor for the British. There were also people who moved willingly because the conditions were so bad, mm-hmm. right? And there was this idea, this hope that, well, it'll be better elsewhere. And there was like a passage, a way to go because of British rule. And so, that created all these new communities, new cultures, and settlements. And of course, they all had their own challenges. Being a South Asian community in Uganda, there's a lot of racial and economic divides that were set up by the British. It was very intentional on their part to kind of keep people separate and to have this divide and rule way of ruling. And of course, that led to all of these problems down the line. Unforeseen challenges when the dictator Idi Amin and before him Obote were in power. All of these resentments and all of the ways that these communities were kept so separate that now it was almost impossible to find a way to coexist. And so, and that led to the exile, which is a part of this book. And so, yeah, I think all of that comes out in the book because that is just so deeply entrenched in this history. It's the reason why it all happened.
Right.
And thinking about displacement and kind of like repeated displacement and migration and all the different reasons why people move by force or by choice. That's very much what I wanted to include in this book.
I want to ask you two questions. The first one, and without giving away any spoilers, if you can, what was the hardest part about writing this book?
There were definitely some parts of the book that felt really challenging to write emotionally, mm-hmm. Because it's so connected to family, to my own family and my own community. There were certain chapters or scenes that I wrote that I really avoided writing for a long time because I knew they were going to be hard. Mm-hmm. And they were really challenging, thinking about, especially like holding a lot of these kind of new stories and understandings of my own family, and then wanting to like do justice to that and to honor that and write it into the book, fictionalized account. It was really hard and weighed on me. It felt very heavy at times. And I think the way that I kind of had to learn to deal with that was to allow myself to step away from writing the book sometimes and to sort of like to really be in tune with my own body and to think about like, okay, to notice how I was responding when I would work on a certain scene or when during the revision process when I had to edit a certain scene that had been really difficult to write. I would have to really like be in tune with myself and be like, okay, I know that it's going to be a hard editing day. And so I know that I'm not going to, after I've finished working on that scene, I'm not going to make myself work on anything else in the book. I'm going to just kind of like leave the world of the book and do something else. Remember that I'm a person outside of this world that I'm writing about, and just sort of like, just like find grounding in other ways. That became really important.
Good. What do you want readers to take away from the novel? So much. So much.
Yeah, I think, first and foremost, I wrote this because I love reading, I love stories, and I really believe in the power of stories to kind of to share emotional truths and to connect. And so that is my biggest hope, is that a reader will read this book and connect on an emotional level to the characters or to their journeys. I think that is really like the most important thing for me. Of course, I also I hope that readers will come away thinking about some of those questions that I was writing into this book. Questions about migration, questions about displacement, questions about what it means to belong, what it means to belong and seek refuge in a place where we're not all safe, we're not all free. And these ideas of collective liberation and community that are really present in different parts of the book, in Uganda, in Canada, and just kind of, thinking about some of those questions as well, which, again, the book doesn't aim to answer, but I think just to like be exploring those notions.
I know the thing that I love when I'm reading is something that makes me go down a rabbit hole and research. That's like my favorite thing. I know that the book has served its purpose for me when I am literally like pausing and researching the history to find how it, correlates with it impacts the story. So this book was full of that for me. It was such a journey. And I've been recommending it to so many people. It's just like, it's so fulfilling. So I'm sure your family is very proud. And someone just said the way you wrote the history of our family was beautiful.
Yeah.
See?
That's my cousin. That's very lovely.
Another comment early on was talking about your prose and how beautiful it was. So I wanted to share that comment with you as well.
Thank you.
So can you share what you're working on next? What's coming? Maybe not.
Well, okay. I will say, the first thing I will say is that it took 6 years to write this book. It was a big undertaking, and I think maybe we don't talk enough about rest and the ways that it's really important, I think, to have some time away to kind of refill and read, and just sort of come back to writing from a place of exploration and play, as opposed to the kind of the ways that in the publishing world you're thinking much more about the ways that your work will be received. And so I'm leaning into rest and recharging and
wonderful.
And I am also working on something else, but I am superstitious and can't talk about it.
Oh, that's perfect. Great. That's so. You said that you love to read. Can you tell us any recommendations or what you're reading right now?
Yeah. So I've been reading a book by Isabella Hamad called After Ghost, which is her second novel, set in Palestine, present day. It's just incredibly beautiful, rich prose, and a really important and necessary story. I'm really enjoying that. And I'm also kind of turning back to books that have felt meaningful to me. Rereading has been, I think, really a balm in this publishing year, sort of coming back to the books that made me want to write. So I have just reread Love Medicine by Louise Erdrich, which is a book that I really love and was very influential when I was writing A History of Burning as well.
Awesome. Well, I can't thank you enough for joining us. I'm so glad I picked this book. It's like perfect. I thought maybe it would be too heavy for summer, but it was perfect. It's a perfect read any time of the year. So thank you so much. It's a fantastic debut. Super happy for all the good praise that you're getting for it. And if you guys don't have it, pick it up from our bookshop and make sure you read A History of Burning. It's the second book in our summer reading series. Thank you, Janika, so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for these wonderful questions and for my book.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.